Welcome to January 19 and 20 daily current affairs discussion. Our first topic of discussion for today is about Nirman Samaad. Now, recently the Ministry of Railways had hosted a mega conclave called Nirman Samaad, which was also attended by leaders of the construction industry. And this particular mega conclave Nirman Samaad, this was mainly aimed at fast-tracking the implementation of railway-related projects, and this was hosted by a dedicated arm of the Ministry of Railways called Railway Vikas Nigam Limited, which is again focused on fast-tracking the implementation of various railway-related projects. And in this particular mega conclave, various issues were discussed, like acquisition of land, license of minor minerals, and then another key issue or topic of discussion in that particular Nirman Samaad conclave was about adoption of FIDIC documents. Now FIDIC, it is basically a French acronym and it stands for International Federation of Consulting Engineers, and this particular institution or organization, it produces standard forms of contracts for the construction as well as engineering industry. Our next topic is about Agni 5. Agni 5 is a nuclear capable surface-to-surface missile of India. This was recently successfully tested from the Abdul Kalam Island located off the coast of Odisha. This Agni 5 nuclear capable surface-to-surface missile is an indigenously built intercontinental ballistic missile of India. That is why this is so much important. It has a range of above 5,000 to 5,500 kilometers. Now there has been a controversy regarding this range. Chinese media, especially Chinese state-owned media like Global Times, and many reports in Global Times have indicated that this Agni 5 might be even having a range up to 8,000 kilometers. And what they are saying is that India might be trying to deliberately downplay the range of Agni 5. And many believe that India is doing so because otherwise China might see the Agni 5 as a major threat to it. China has already said that Agni 5 is a security threat to China, and some believe that India might be trying to deliberately downplay the range of Agni 5 in order to not irk China. This is a three-stage missile which is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead of around 1.5 tons. Agni 5 is what we call a fire and forget missiles. Means once it is fired, it can only be stopped by an interceptor missile, which currently only very few countries have, like US, Russia, Israel are probably the only three countries which have access to this kind of interceptor missiles. This missile will eventually join the arsenal of the Tri-Service Strategic Force Command. The Strategic Force Command is basically an institution in India which deals with the nuclear stockpiles. Now with another successful testing of Agni 5, India has become a part of a super exclusive club of countries with intercontinental ballistic missiles. Currently only very few countries have intercontinental ballistic missiles. Mostly it is believed that these P5 countries have intercontinental ballistic missiles. So now India also has acquired intercontinental ballistic missiles, and it is also believed that North Korea also has intercontinental ballistic missiles. And this Agni 5, it can be even launched from mobile launches as well as it can be even hidden inside a railway wagon. So it has that kind of potential also. And another peculiarity of this Agni 5 is that this can be used to destroy satellites. It can be used as an anti-satellite weapon. Recently, cyber as well as space warfare has been identified as the fourth and fifth sections of warfare. So this has to be seen from that background. Now under hostile circumstances, this Agni 5, it can even be used to launch Indian satellites. India has a series of Agni missiles. We have an Agni 1 with a 700 kilometer range, then Agni 2 with a 2000 kilometer range, Agni 3 with a 2500 kilometer range, and Agni 4 with a more than 3500 kilometer range, etc. Now our third topic is about the Australia group. Recently, why the Australia group has been in news? We all know about it. Basically, India became the 43rd member of the Australia group officially on January 19, 2018. So our Australia group, basically it's one among the multilateral export control regimes. These multilateral export control regimes are designed to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, means biological, chemical and nuclear weapons. And there are currently 4 of them. One is the nuclear suppliers group, then you have the missile technology control regime, then we have Australia group and Wassenaar arrangement. And recently India has been trying to join this multilateral export control regime. In 2016 we became a part of the Missile Technology Control Regime or MTCR. In 2017 we joined Wassenaar arrangement, and in 2018 now we have officially become a member of Australia group. So now this is a big achievement for India, and now out of all these multilateral export control regimes, the only regime in which India is not a member will be the nuclear suppliers group. And India has actually applied to join the nuclear suppliers group, but its bid to join the NSG was curtailed by the Chinese. Now India joining this Australia group, it shows the credibility of our non-proliferation efforts towards building a weapons of mass destruction free world. And this was the idea, the very idea that was proposed by our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Now what is the Australia group and what are the important prelims related facts that we should be aware with respect to the Australia group? Basically the Australia group was formed in 1985 in the event of the use of chemical weapons by Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war. Australia group is an informal forum of countries. Now what do these countries want? They want to make sure that, or they want to ensure that exports do not contribute to the development of chemical or biological weapons. Basically when this Iraq made chemical weapons, they got these components from the international chemical industry. So these Australia group countries, they want to make sure that exports will not be contributing to the development of chemical or biological weapons. And Australia was the main country that took this initiative forward. That is why it is called by the term Australia group. And how do we achieve that goal? The Australia group tries to achieve this goal by the harmonization of export controls. Now another thing that UPSC can ask us with respect to Australia group, if there is a statement type of question, is whether this Australia group is a treaty or whether it has some legally binding obligations. And one thing you need to remember is that there are no legally binding obligations with respect to Australia group. It is more of a group of countries or an informal grouping of countries. And all of these multilateral export control regimes with respect to one thing you need to remember is that all of these multilateral export control regimes are informal group of countries. There are no legally binding instruments associated with these multilateral export control regimes. So they are not a treaty like the Non-Proliferation Treaty or the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty or CTBT. Now another specialty of this Australia group is that all the states which are part of this Australia group are also parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention as well as the Biological Weapons Convention. In 2011 prelims, UPSC had already asked us a question with respect to Australia group. Now we will try to have an answer to that particular question. See this 2011 question. Recently the USA decided to support India's membership in multilateral export control regimes called Australia Group and Wassenaar Arrangement. What is the difference between them? That was our question. That was a prelims question by UPSC in 2011. We had two statements. First statement was, the Australia group is an informal arrangement, which again, see, remember this point, this informal arrangement. This is a key word with respect to these multilateral export control regimes. UPSC can ask you statements saying whether this is an informal arrangement or not. It's an informal arrangement which aims to allow exporting arrangement to minimize the risk of assisting chemical and biological weapons proliferation. So that part of the statement is true. Whereas the Wassenaar arrangement is a formal group under the OECD, that is wrong, and holding identical objectives. We have already discussed about the Wassenaar arrangement, and we know that the Wassenaar arrangement does not have identical objectives when you compare it to the Australia group. See, what are the objectives of the Wassenaar arrangement? Wassenaar arrangement aims to prevent the proliferation of conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies. So their objectives are entirely different. So our statement 1 is wrong in this case. Then let us have a look at the statement 2. The Australia group comprises predominantly of Asian, African and North American countries, whereas the members of Wassenaar arrangement are predominantly from the European Union and American continents. See, the problem with this second statement is that Australia group members are predominantly European members. So this first part of that particular statement is wrong, and Australia group does not have any African member, and it probably only has a very few Asian member countries like Japan. So that part of the statement is wrong. So in this case, both of our statements are wrong. So our answer is option D, neither 1 nor 2. Our next topic is about the Budapest Convention. Now recently, why the convention was in the news was due to the fact that the Ministry of Home Affairs have mentioned that India is considering joining this Budapest Convention because there was a lot of surge in cybercrime that is happening in India, especially after the push for a digital India. The Budapest Convention is also known by the term the Convention on Cybercrime of the Council of Europe. And this particular Budapest Convention, it was negotiated by the Council of Europe. Council of Europe is basically a pan-European organization which consists of most of the European countries except a few countries like Belarus. So it is a European organization which is much larger than even the European Union. The European Court of Human Rights is the most famous body of the Council of Europe. Now this is one organization many students often mistake about the European Union. So European Union and Council of Europe are completely different. Now why this Budapest Convention is really important is due to the fact that this is the only binding international instrument on the issue of cybercrime. So this is the only binding international instrument on this particular issue of cybercrime. It provides guidelines for any country developing comprehensive national strategies and associated legislation with respect to cybercrime. Now this convention, it also establishes a framework for international cooperation between the state parties to this particular convention. Now what are the different types of crimes with which the Budapest Convention deals with? It deals with the crimes like crimes committed via the internet as well as other computer networks, then infringement of copyright. So copyright issue, dealing with the copyright infringement issues is a major part of the Budapest Convention. Then computer related fraud, child pornography, violations of network security, etc. Now mainly with respect to members of this Budapest Convention, mainly we have around 51 parties to this convention. Mainly they are Council of Europe members, except a few members like Russia. Then in addition to that, some of the major global countries like Australia, Canada, Israel, Japan, Sri Lanka, and even certain countries like Argentina are also part of this particular Budapest Convention. Now in India there has been a huge debate regarding this Budapest Convention. Certain countries like India and Brazil haven't joined the Budapest Convention, saying that they were not part of drafting this particular convention. And now again there has been some counter arguments to India joining the Budapest Convention, which has been raised by several security experts and all. Like some are saying that sharing data with the foreign law enforcement agencies, infringement on the national sovereignty of India, and some are saying that this might be a threat to the rights of individuals. So anyway, there has been this huge debate in India with respect to Budapest Convention, and when you are writing answers with respect to GS3 about cyber security, this is one solution perhaps we can write in our answers on how to deal with this kind of cyber crimes and how can India enhance its international cooperation in order to deal with the cyber crimes. Now our next topic is about the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority. Now recently why this was in the news was due to the fact that NPPA has fixed the retail price of certain drugs. It has mainly fixed the retail price of around 30 drug formulations, especially drugs which are used to treat diabetes, bacterial infections and high blood pressure, etc. Now what is this NPPA and what are the things we need to remember with respect to this NPPA? See, this Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, basically it implements and enforces the Drugs Price Control Order of 1995. And now this Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority or NPPA, it is also mandated to fix or revise the prices of controlled bulk drugs and formulations. So that is one key objective of NPPA, and also in addition to that, it enforces prices and availability of medicines all across the country. Also it monitors the price of decontrolled drugs also. So remember that it monitors the price of decontrolled drugs also. This is done in order to keep them at reasonable levels. It is also entrusted with the task of recovering amounts overcharged by manufacturers for the controlled drugs from customers. Our next topic is about the Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. This program has been highly successful and recently it crossed the 1 crore mark in antenatal checkups, and that is why this has been in news. So what do we mean by antenatal checkups? These antenatal checkups or prenatal checkups are care women receive from healthcare professionals during the time of their pregnancy. That is what we mean by antenatal checkups or antenatal care. This was basically an initiative of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now let us have a look at the major objective of this Pradhan Mantri Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. The main idea behind this particular Abhiyan is to provide comprehensive and quality antenatal care free of cost to all pregnant women across the country. And this particular antenatal care, this will be provided on the 9th of every month. That is the speciality of this particular program. So this particular healthcare, it is provided at the 9th of every month. Remember that fact. Now this program, it guarantees women a minimum package of antenatal care during the 2nd or 3rd trimesters of their pregnancy at government facilities. Now another speciality of this Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan is that here there is the systematic approach for engagement with the private sector. So even the private sector is being engaged highly in the Surakshit Matritva Abhiyan. That is the key point here, or that is one of the main specialties of this particular scheme. Now, as part of the scheme, the government motivates private practitioners to volunteer for the campaign. This particular approach by the union government has been highly successful. Even some very famous doctors have been going and even serving at very rural areas, especially in states like Chhattisgarh, especially in areas which are like highly affected by even left-wing extremism and all. So this kind of an approach by the government in getting the private sector engaged with this particular scheme has been highly successful. Also, as part of this particular program, mother and child protection cards as well as safe motherhood booklets will be given. Our next topic is about Accessible India campaign. Now, recently, why this was in news is very important. This was in news due to the fact that 100 accessible websites of various state governments as well as union territories were recently launched in India. So 100 accessible government websites were recently launched. Now, what do we mean by accessible websites? See, these are websites which can be easily understood and perceived by people with a disability. So these accessible websites are, simply speaking, websites that can be freely accessed by people with disabilities. Means, for example, let us take the case of a normal website. A blind person might be using the text-to-speech facility on the website. So if you are using some image on the website, you should provide some like a text equivalent of that image also. So this particular blind person can use this text-to-speech facility in order to understand the contents of the website. So these kind of things will be done in an accessible website. So recently only India focused on building this kind of accessible government website, whereas in the Western countries and the United States and all, it has been mandatory to make all the government's websites as accessible websites. These building of accessible websites were done under a scheme or under an initiative called Accessible India Campaign or the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan. This was a nationwide campaign by the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, and the objective of this particular campaign, Accessible India Campaign or the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan, is to achieve universal accessibility for persons with disabilities. Here you can see the logo of this particular campaign. So this campaign was launched by the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, which comes under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Now this particular campaign, it was set up along the lines of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So again you can see a contribution of United Nations to humanity. These sort of things is the reason why the United Nations matters, and it can be simply written off. And this particular Accessible India campaign, it has three components, or it has three parts. The part A, or the first part, it focuses on built environment accessibility. Means the idea behind this particular component is to make government offices much more accessible to persons with disabilities. Then the second component is transportation system accessibility. Means the transportation systems, things like railways, bus as well as public transportation facilities, these things should be made much more accessible to persons with disabilities. Then the third part is in achieving information and communication ecosystem accessibility. See, this is one key challenge that persons with disabilities often faces. It is difficult for them to read a pamphlet or even to read the train related information timings or access websites. So achieving this sort of an information and communication ecosystem accessibility is one key goal of this particular Accessible India campaign. As part of this campaign, the government has been urging public as well as private organizations in order to use their CSR funds for building accessible infrastructure. Now our next topic is about Office of Profit. This is a burning issue right now. Recently the Election Commission has recommended to the President for the disqualification of 20 of the Aam Aadmi Party MLAs for holding Office of Profit. That is why this was been in news. Now in this case the President is bound by Election Commission recommendation. Now what do we mean by an Office of Profit? See, if any MLA or MP they holds a government office, then they are receiving some benefits from it, then it is termed, then that particular government office is termed an Office of Profit. So an MLA or an MP will be disqualified if he holds an Office of Profit under the central or state government. But there are certain exceptions to this particular rule. Certain offices were exempted from the Office of Profit by law. For example, the chairperson of National Women Commission is exempted from the Office of Profit by law. Means the person holding such an office will not be disqualified even if he is an MLA or MP. Basic criteria for the disqualification of an MP is explained in the Article 102 of the Constitution, and in the case of MLA, it is explained by the Article 191 of the Constitution. What is the underlying principle for having Office of Profit as a criteria for disqualification? Why there is that kind of a scenario in India? It's due to the fact that the makers of the Constitution believed that the legislators should not feel obligated to the executive in any way, because these kind of obligations would influence them in discharging their legislative functions. Or an MP or MLA should be free to carry out their own duties without any governmental pressure on them. So that is why this kind of an Office of Profit provision was established by the Constitution. Our last topic is about INS Vikrant, the first indigenous built aircraft carrier of India. Recently, why this was in the news was due to the fact that the Indian Navy have clarified that it is confident of commissioning this indigenous aircraft carrier or INS Vikrant by October 2020. Right now we only have a 44,500 ton aircraft carrier INS Vikramaditya, but this was basically brought from Russia, and there has been several issues associated with this Russian made aircraft carrier. So due to that, India started developing its own aircraft carriers, and the first of them is INS Vikrant. Now due to INS Vikrant, India has become a part of an allied club of nations who can design and construct their own indigenous aircraft carriers. Only very few countries can do this. Countries like US, Russia, China, India, etc. INS Vikrant, it gets its name from India's first aircraft carrier. So India already had an aircraft carrier called INS Vikrant in the past that was bought from the UK. Now whenever you study about aircraft carriers, one thing you need to study is about the mechanism used in these aircraft carriers to launch and recover aircraft. So in the case of lesser advanced aircraft carriers, they mainly use stow-bar technology in order to launch and recover aircraft. So this is a relatively less advanced technology, and it costs less, and it is easy to implement or develop these kind of aircraft carriers. This INS Vikrant will be using the stow-bar technology in order to launch and recover aircrafts. Stow-bar, it stands for short takeoff but arrested recovery mechanism. Here we will be using a sky jump in order to launch these aircrafts. INS Vikrant is capable of carrying 20 fighter jets and 10 other aircrafts, and it is expected that this will be also carrying Kamov helicopters from Russia, and it will be carrying the MiG-29K fighter jets from Russia. So these are multi-role combat fighter jets from Russia. Earlier it was believed that INS Vikrant will be carrying a mix of the Russian Mikoyan MiG-29K fighter jets as well as the indigenously built naval version of Tejas. But recently the Indian Navy rejected the naval version of Tejas, saying that it was overweight for carrier operations. So now INS Vikrant will be mainly carrying these MiG-29K fighter jets. Now the main problem with these kind of stow-bar aircraft carriers is that they can only carry aircrafts with a very high thrust to weight ratio. So only a very few aircrafts like the Shenyang J-15, Sukhoi Su-33 and Mikoyan MiG-29K etc. work with these kind of stow-bar aircraft carriers. Now Boeing has been trying to sell the naval version of the F-18 Super Hornet to India, and there has been saying things like the F-18 Super Hornet will also work with the stow-bar technology and all. Mainly countries like India, Russia and China are using these stow-bar technology powered aircraft carriers. And this particular INS Vikrant, it is being manufactured at Kochi Shipyard Limited. The basic design of the aircraft carrier was made by the Indian Navy's Directorate of Naval Design, and further the design was completed by designers of the Kochi Shipyard Limited. This is a technological masterpiece from India. It is designed to survive chemical, biological or even nuclear weapons. Now let us also have a look at INS Vishal. INS Vishal will be the second indigenously built aircraft carrier of India, and the peculiarity of INS Vishal is that this will be a humongous aircraft carrier. This will be a 65,000 ton super carrier of India, and this is the first ever super carrier that India will be wielding. Earlier there has been discussions that INS Vishal will be nuclear powered, but now it has been estimated that this might be conventionally powered. Right now it is in the design stage, and the main advantage associated with this INS Vishal when compared to the earlier aircraft carriers of India is that here we will be using the catobar technology, the much more advanced catobar technology. Right now only very few countries like US and France only have this kind of catobar technology powered aircraft carriers. Catobar stands for catapult based aircraft launch mechanism. Better fighter jets can be launched by using this catobar mechanism, and in order to get this catobar technology, in order to power our aircraft carriers, India has been working closely in relations with the United States. In 2016, India has signed an agreement called Information Exchange Annex in order to ensure the cooperation between India and US when it comes to aircraft carrier technology. So now that Russia hasn't been much of a success in building aircraft carriers, US will be India's premier partner in building indigenous aircraft carriers. It is widely believed that this INS Vishal, it will be using some kind of technology like the US electromagnetic aircraft launch system or the EMALS system. As of now, this is one of the most advanced technologies behind aircraft carriers. That's all about January 19 and 20 daily current affairs. Be sure to check out our daily current affairs materials as well as the monthly current affairs digest in order to get a detailed analysis about these current affairs topics.